Hi everyone. So I'm basically doing a video series where I'm reflecting on some of the early parts of my career and then basically saying what I would do differently now that I've got that experience and that wisdom. And maybe you're experiencing something like that in your career, and this could give you some kind of tips or advice, or just help you understand that actually everybody goes through it, kind of thing. So today's story is going to be about when I was working for one of a big enterprise company, software engineer. I was a software tester, and I worked on this product for about 3 years, and about a year and a half into working on this project, I joined as a graduate, and I realized that I didn't quite understand things that I felt other people assumed I understood about how the product worked. Or, my role was to test an area, but when it broke, when the test failed, I didn't really understand what was going on, how to debug it, all those kind of things. And it was really difficult, and basically the way I felt was that I couldn't say, hey guys, can someone help explain this? I don't know it. When you've been doing that job for a year and a half, you assume that people think you know what you're doing, which, first thing is a lot of people know what they're doing a lot less than you assume they're doing. So I had this kind of feeling of dread that I didn't know how to ask for help, which means I'd struggle with a problem and try to figure it out on my own. And that's problematic. It takes the joy out of the work. It makes you feel kind of like you have failed. I'm very fortunate. I haven't really suffered imposter syndrome, but this would come into that. So other people in that situation may feel an anxiety around it. Me, I sort of feel disinterested. I kind of lose passion for things when that happens, rather than kind of judging myself. Now, let's fast forward 15 years where I've got the experience and the wisdom. And how would I dissect this? And I think it's two parts. First part is when you join as someone new, you're all ears, you're waiting for people to kind of share, almost like the apprentice, sharing what the masters or the master, how they do things, how the world works. You learn from what they do, and I've experienced, you also learn the culture of the company and all these kinds of things, which is a whole nother subject. But here, I was basically told how something works because someone was passing that work on to me. So the problem was, it assumes that the person who's teaching you is a good teacher. And I'll tell you something. Most people aren't great teachers because teaching is a skill. You cannot assume that someone who just does a job can teach that job. Not to the point that someone like me in that situation feels competent enough to know how to be the master of my little domain, right? And so what I would do differently is I would take on the responsibility of studying how the product worked. And bearing in mind, this product, very abstract. I couldn't tell my friends what it did. It was so abstract. And I worked on a component in a product, which was then used to make other products, with ultimately the team spanning different continents. So I only knew that much. If you want to feel like the work you do is not impactful, work on something so small in a big picture that nobody really knows what it does, right? Anyway, so the point here is that I didn't study, I didn't take the notes, I didn't form my understanding and repeat that back to my colleagues for them to validate. And if I had it documented, it would mean, okay, I've got a point of reference, I can go back and just validate my understanding. Truth is, doing that document is solidifying your understanding. You may never need the document. It's proper study. What happens is someone explains something in early days, it makes sense. We're all smart people, right? It makes sense. You say, right, yes, okay, I get it. You can recognize what they're saying. Fast forward 2 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, a year, and you have to recall those components, those bits. you don't remember everything because you haven't gone through the repetition, you haven't formed that mental model of it. And reality is you don't have the skills to recall how something works. So let alone if you were taught things with gaps, the things you were taught were missing the components that helped you recall how it worked. Now I could get away with it because my job was in software testing, so I understood how my bit worked, but when the components underneath failed, when I had to write new tests and do things with that deep understanding of how all these little things worked in random scenarios, because that's what testing in this particular case was about, that's when you really kind of lack that understanding. So it's crazy to think that I go a year longer into my work and realize I don't know how this thing works. I should know. And one of the things that scared me was some feedback from my manager. We did this peer review feedback. The manager said to me, Martin, one of the feedback pieces is you asked the same question over. And what that did, it's valid feedback. Maybe I didn't write notes, which is what I'm saying. But what it also did is said, don't ask the same question again. And it also told me, if you don't understand and you've asked before, that's your problem. Nobody wants to hear. So I realized that even the feedback I was getting was not helpful. So the team weren't caring about the team's understanding of things. And so if I was in that situation, I'd just bite the bullet and say, hey, I'm trying to understand how this thing really works, but these are the questions I have that I don't understand. And you boil things down to questions. That's a good way of bringing it down to your understanding, and just fill in the questions. And do you know what? Sometimes, this is where being later in my career, where I don't fear the consequences of saying, wow, I don't know anything. When you're early, it's really hard, but I would say, I don't know this, I want to know this, because that's the greater good, right? I'd rather be good at my job, so the team benefits, than to be hiding. I wouldn't say it like that. It's about being a little bit fearless. Find the colleagues who are more approachable and say, hey, how should I approach kind of really understanding this? Can you help me? Can you support me? A good mentor would be a great thing in that scenario. But the lessons I learned is I should have documented it. I should have realized that I couldn't trust the education coming from my team to let me do my job, that I had to own that. I had to really push that, and find a mentor, find someone who can help guide you if that's possible. And the biggest thing is know when to call it, know when to say a year. Like this part of my career, there'll be more videos on this, but I left some things way too long, and I wouldn't do that again. And it's about biting the bullet and recognizing, reflecting when this isn't right. It's been 6 months and I'm not enjoying this in the way that I should be. So let's fix that rather than waiting to 18 months. In fact, I think it was even to 3 years before I ended up changing departments or something, 4 years. And that's a long time. So I hope that's been helpful. If you want to see more videos like this, just leave a reply. If you would deal with this differently, say what you would do that's different. I think that's really good to get the replies, to help anyone else who feels like they're in a job, the team thinks that they should know what they do, or they're in a job and they think the team believes that they know what they're doing, but they don't know what they're doing. And how do you deal with that?